Om Sarvadharma Sthapakastvam Sarvadharma Swarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishna Te Namaha. We are studying here the first part of Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, named Historical Background and Early Life. Yesterday, or day before rather, we studied that he was born on the most auspicious occasion. And now, let us see, he is growing now. Mind you, avatar is growing, not a human being. And so, the things described here will be befitting only God himself, not man. Chapter 6, Gadadhar's childhood and the death of his father. That is a different thing. We shall come to that when we come to that. Now let us see about the childhood. The gift of a cow by Ramachandra. That means whatever need God requires for his play automatically gets fulfilled without his asking even. According to the scriptures, the parents of incarnations like Ramakrishna and others knew through their spiritual visions, both before and after the birth of their sons, that these were under the special protection of providence. If nothing else, those boys were under the special protection of providence, but blinded by parental affection. So the parental affection makes them blind, means unaware of these truths. They know these truths, but affection, parental affection, make them overlook that truth. That is blinded. They forgot that fact and would therefore always be anxious about their welfare. So, this is how the avatar grows in childhood. In childhood, being born a man, he does require the anxious care taken by the parents. And so, though the parents know he is God himself, yet they forget that because the parental affection enters and covers their eyes. This applies to Khudiram and his wife Chandra Devi also. For the lotus face of their loving child made them often forget the divine dream at Gaya and the celestial vision near the Shiva temple, and they began to devise various means for his proper care and nourishment. So that is how the children grow. The news of the birth was sent to Ramchandra, Khudiram's prosperous nephew, at Medinipur. Fearing that there would not be sufficient milk for his uncle's poor family, he sent them a milch cow, thereby removing Khudiram's anxiety on that score. But though all that was wanted for the newborn child came in unexpected ways from different quarters, There was no end to the anxiety of the parents. Time thus rolled on, Gadadhar's charms, that is, God's charms. As days went by, the baby's charm began to attract people more and more. He captivated the hearts not only of his parents and every other members of the family, but also of the village women. So it is growing. Whenever the village women had some leisure, they would hasten to Chandra, and if asked why they came, would answer, what, what are we to do? Our longing to see your baby every day brings us here. So that is how God spreads his charm. And we are, Saradananda Swamiji is filling us here with devotion by this description. From now on, women relatives from the neighboring villages also began to come to Kshudiram's humble cottage oftener than before. From the nearby villages also. Growing up without want and surrounded by love and care, the newcomer gradually passed his 5th month, and the time for the first rice-eating ceremony of the baby was at hand. First, Annaprashan. Annaprashan. So, Anna has been translated as rice. Anna means food. Of course, rice or rather payasam is given, but the idea is first eating of food other than mother's milk. That is a ceremony. At first, Kshudiram decided to perform this ceremony in a simple way in keeping with his means. His idea was just to make it conform to the scriptural injunction and to conclude it by giving the child the rice offered to Raghuveer and to invite a few near relatives. But actually things took a different course. God is there. At the secret promptings of Kshudiram's great friend Dharmadas Laha, the village landlord, the foremost Brahmins and other leading men of the village came to Kshudiram and to his utter surprise insisted that he should feed them on that auspicious day. People coming and asking because Laha has prompted them. Kshudiram was in a great fix, for since all the villagers respected and loved him, so I am told that he is loved by all the castes. Though the Brahmins came to ask him, he could not make up his mind as to whom to invite and whom to leave out. And to invite all was out of the question because of his slender resources. Convinced in his heart that Raghuveer would show him the way out, he sought the advice of Dharmadas, and that was Dharmadas's idea. As soon as he came to know of his friend's desire to take the responsibility, friends mean Dharmadas's desire to take the responsibility for the ceremony on himself, Gadadhar left the whole matter, Kshudiram left the whole matter to him and returned home because he has no means and Dharmadas wanted to do everything. Dharmadas cheerfully made all arrangements for the ceremony almost entirely at his own expense. Almost because Kshudiram must have contributed little. Kshudiram left and the function went off smoothly. This is what happens when God is there. We are told that people of all castes in the village came to Kshudiram's cottage for the ceremony and enjoyed taking the food offered to Raghuveer. Many poor beggars also had their fill that day and left each with a blessing from Kshudiram's son. So we see All caste, beggars, everybody got food that day. The turn of Chandra Devi's divine vision. Now, because the God has born as a child, so the visions also have changed. Gadadhar's every little action appeared sweeter with the passing of time and filled Chandra Devi's heart with joy. But she was not quite free from fear. Before the birth of the child, she had never asked the gods for any favor because that was not her nature. But though she was very poor, but now, urged by a mother's love, 1,000 times a day, consciously or unconsciously, her heart poured forth prayers for her son, and yet she could not shake off her anxiety altogether. So, mother's heart is intruded by Saradananda Swami and describing. The thought of her son's care and well-being so completely filled her mind now that before long it could not but come in the way of her seeing spiritual vision. So the mind is on a lower level because that is necessary for the care of the child. And so the visions are lost. But they still came to her from time to time, that is innate spirituality, and filled her sometimes with amazement, sometimes with an apprehension of evil. We shall now relate an example of this, having heard it from a reliable source. Chandradevi's vision, Gadadhar looked much bigger. One morning when Gadadhar was 7 or 8 months old, he fell asleep at his mother's breast. Chandra put him to rest under a mosquito net and went out of the room to attend to her household duties because he was sleeping. Shortly afterwards, when she happened to come back to the room for something, she found that instead of the child, a strange, tall person was lying under the net, filling the whole bed. In great alarm, Chandra rushed out of the room and called for her husband. God, so now child, now fully developed man. As soon as he came, she told him what she had seen, and both of them went to find no one except the child sleeping as before. Even then, Chandra's fear did not abate. She went on repeating, I am certain that it was a mischievous spirit who did it. That is because of the anxiety. I distinctly saw a tall person lying in the bed where our son lies. It was certainly not a delusion. How could it be? Do call immediately an experienced exorcist to examine the child. Exorcist are the people, if a ghost or some demigod has taken possession, they can get rid of that. So she wanted Shudiram to call an exorcist. Otherwise, some harm may befall him. Shudiram consoled her, saying, there is nothing strange in your getting visions even now about our son, for we were blessed with them even before his birth. So drive away the idea that it was the doing of a spirit. With Raghuveer in the house, so he has a stronger faith because he is a man. Chandra Devi being woman has more feeling, delicate. With Raghuveer in the house, is it ever possible for spirits to come here to harm the boy? Therefore be at rest and do not speak to anyone about it because unnecessarily it will spread, scandal-like. Be sure that Raghuveer always protects him. Although for the time being Chandra was pacified by her husband's words, the fear of harm befalling the child still haunted her mind like a shadow. For a long time that day, with folded hands, she poured out to Raghuveer the anguish of her heart. Because not calling exorcist, so to Raghuveer she is still. Sarvamangala, the younger sister of Gadadhar. So after a long time, another daughter was born to the parents. Years thus went by, bringing to Gadadhar's parents joy and sorrow, exaltation and anxiety. The sweet influence the little boy exerted over them and over others from the very beginning increased day by day. Joy and sorrow because of anxieties, exaltation and anxiety. 4 or 5 years gradually passed. During this period, Khudiram's last child, a daughter named Sarvamangala, was born. So up to 5 years, Ramchandra sending the cow, people getting attracted more and more, and Chandra Devi seeing a vision of God sleeping in her bed. Gadadhar's preparation for going to school. So now he has to go to school. As Gadadhar grew up, Khudiram was filled with wonder and delight in noticing the development of the boy's remarkable memory and intelligence. So this is the first notice. As the child is growing, they saw that his memory was exceptional and intelligence. Sometimes he would take the lively boy on his lap and repeat to him a long list of names of his ancestors, because man feels obligation to all the ancestors because he got his body through them. So that is a custom to remember the names of the ancestors. And Khudiram was expert in that. He narrated a list of ancestors and he found Gadadhar remembers it. Or short hymns to gods and goddesses. Short hymns to gods and goddesses. And the various ways of paying homage to them. So hymns and how to salute them, how to pay homage to them, are wonderful stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, that is in the Indian blood. He found that Gadadhar could remember by hearing it only once, most of what he was told, even after a long time. Because one type of memory is that tape recorder like it. You can immediately hear, afterwards forget. But this is immediately remembered and goes deep in his memory. And that when the boy was asked to repeat, he could do so without faltering. At the same time, he discovered that just as the boy took to and remembered some things with great eagerness, it is selective memory, that which is connected with the spiritual life. He also remained indifferent to certain other things which did not appeal to him in spite of all effort to arouse his interest. He noticed this when trying to teach him arithmetic. So no calculation in his life. Everything is spontaneous. Especially the multiplication table. These days the children do not remember because of the computer and calculator. And thought it unnecessary to force the impatient lad. He thought because he is restless, still so young to learn those things. But finding that the boy was becoming more and more restless, he sent him to school after the usual ceremony. So going to school also is a ceremony. He was then 5 years old. Gadadhar was very happy to meet boys of his own age. That is the purpose of going to school. And his loving ways endeared him to them and to the teacher. So, because he is love inside, so friends and teacher, everybody started loving him. The school of the Lahad. The school was held in the spacious theatre hall in front of the house of the Lahad, the landlords of the village. A teacher, paid mainly by them, taught their own children, children, and those of the neighborhood. That was the school. In fact, it was the Lahas who were chiefly responsible for starting the school, though other people might have initiated help. It was not far from Khudiram's cottage and was held twice daily. That was the custom in many schools. Morning and evening, afternoon one should say. The children came in the morning and after learning their lessons for 2 or 3 hours, returned home for the bath and food. This bath in Bengal is taken just before lunch. So bath is followed by food. They came again at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, remained till sunset, evening also, and were then free. Very young boys like Gadadhar had not, of course, to study for so long a period, but had nevertheless to remain in the school. After finishing their lessons, the little boys stayed in their places in the school or sometimes went for play. The older boys helped the newcomers with their lessons and also saw to it that they went through their old lessons every day. So, seeing that they have gone through old lessons, teach them new lessons was the duty of the older boys. Thus, although the school had only one teacher, the work went on smoothly, held by the senior boys. One Jadunath Sarkar was in charge when Gadadhar first entered the school, but he retired shortly afterwards for various reasons. And when Rajendranath Sarkar was appointed in his place. So names of Gadadhar's teachers. Shuddharam became aware of the boy's peculiar temperament. Now one important thing in his temperament. The wonderful dreams and visions which had begun even before Gadadhar was born and foretold the boy's destiny had made a lasting impression on Khudiram's mind. And so whenever he found the boy doing something naughty, like all lively children, he could never be harsh with him. Instead, he would gently ask the boy not to do it again. He now and then noticed signs of willfulness in Gadadhar. That means not listening to what the parents are telling or elderly people are telling. Willfulness. But he was not sure whether this was due to the undue attention everybody paid him, because if people pamper, this willfulness comes, or to the boy's own nature. Instead of going to school, the self-willed boy would go and play with his companions outside the village. One thing. Because he wants companions, so school or outside, or without caring to tell anybody, go to an open-air performance called the Yatra at some place in the neighborhood. So attracted by anything religious and company. Khudiram did not scold him for this willfulness as other parents would have done, for he now felt convinced that it was this that would ultimately help the boy to become great. Understood? Important point. When you judge the character of your children, freedom is the first sign of growth. Don't impose things upon them. Only see that they do not go astray or they do not take a wrong path. Otherwise, let them be free. That will ultimately help the boy to become great. And there was good reason for him to think so, since he invariably found that Gadadhar would not rest till he accomplished what he had set out to do. One thing, would never try to hide anything he had done by telling a lie. That is most important thing. And would above all never think of doing harm to anybody. So willfulness does not include doing harm to anybody. But there was one thing that really worried Kshutiram. When the boy was asked to or forbidden to do anything, he would deliberately go counter to the instruction till it was put to him in a way that appealed to his heart and understanding. A big thing comes here. I told you the other day that this is the age of liberty, fraternity and equality, and applied to two spheres. Women, which constitute half the humanity, and common man, which from another side constitutes almost half the humanity. And Sri Ramakrishna broke open both these. Nowadays, a third type of humanity is seeking liberty, fraternity and equality. You must have noticed it. And that is the children. I remember one incident. A couple from Punjab had gone to America, settled there, and a son was born to them in America. Father died due to motor accident. The mother could not control the boy. So she brought him to India. And he lived in a culture institute, and the mother's parents lived in Chandigarh. So he came to Chandigarh. Now one day he tells me, the boy is studying in, I think, 5th or 6th or at the most 7th standard. One day he tells me that suppose an old man of 60 tells me something, will I listen? Is he more knowing than me? Is he telling more correct things than me? Why should I listen to him? I said that, but you generally listen to us. He said, that is a different thing. I see that you are wiser than me. But simply because of age, how can I hold anybody wiser? Remember? And this thing, good or bad, I am not telling, but is enveloping the whole world now. So the question came to me that this is another area where this liberty, fraternity and equality has to be thought of. And then I thought whether Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother or Swami Vivekananda has discussed it, has told anything about it as they have done about the women and common mass. And then it came to my notice that they might not have told, but they have shown by doing that. And here is that instance. If you convince him in a way which appeals to his mind, brain and heart, then he will obey. But simply because you are older, he will not obey. And that is what we find Gadadhar doing. And we find the same thing in Swami Vivekananda. We find the same thing in our gentle Holy Mother also. So that is the point. And we see it here. And the incident will follow. Kshutiram understood that this really showed the boy's desire to know the why and wherefore of everything. But he realized that people would not normally tolerate such behavior, nor take the trouble to satisfy the boy's curiosity by telling him the reason for everything. So generally what happens? You do like that. He does not do. You are not listening to me. What I say you are not doing. That is what the parents do. That is not correct. You tell him in the way in which he will understand and feel in his heart. Then he will listen. As a result, he thought it was possible that the boy might occasionally be led to ignore the conventional rules of good conduct. It was the occurrence at that time of a small incident which gave rise to this apprehension of Kshudiram. It also made him understand the working of the boy's mind, and he began carefully to guide him accordingly. That is what the parents should do. An incident indicating it. There is a big tank known as Haldar Pukur by the side of Kshudiram's house. All the villagers use its clear, pure water for bathing, drinking, cooking, etc. It had two bathing ghats, one for men and the other for women. Young boys like Gadadhar would very often use the ghat resort for women. Coming one day for a bath to that ghat with a few boys of his own age, Gadadhar started jumping and swimming in the water and made himself a nuisance to the women who had come there to bathe. Elderly women who were occupied with their daily prayers and other devotions, that is what they do after the bath immediately, found that now and then a little water was splashed over them. They told the boys to stop, but the boys would not listen. Annoyed at this, one of the women scolded them, saying, "Why do you come here? Can't you go to the men's ghat? Here women wash their clothes after their bath. You should know that women must not be seen undressed." Gadadhar asked, "Why not?" But instead of making him understand, she began to scold him all the more. Seeing that women were annoyed and fearing that they would complain to their parents, the boys behaved better. But Gadadhar hit upon a plan. For 2 or 3 days, he hid himself behind a tree near the tank and peeped at the women while they were taking their bath. When later he met the elderly woman who had scolded him, he told her, "Day before yesterday I saw 4 women bathing. Yesterday 6 and today 8. But I find that nothing has happened to me." She thereupon came to Chandra and told her laughingly what the boy had said. So to him it had not affected. At an opportune moment, Chandra spoke to Gadadhar again, gently but in a convincing manner. "It is true, nothing will happen to you when you do that. Only the women feel insulted. They are in no way different from me. And so if you insult them, it is the same as insulting me. In future, don't do anything that would hurt their sense of honor. Is it right to wound their feelings as well as mine?" The boy understood and never again behaved that way. So this Khudiram came to know, and Khudiram thought that he may sometimes not listen to the usual rules of conduct. The progress and range of Gadadhar's education. Now the other side. So understand now, liberty, equality and fraternity the children want. And if they are told anything in a convincing way, they will listen. Not simply that other people are older to them. This must be remembered by all the parents and teachers. The progress and range of Gadadhar's education. To resume the story, Gadadhar's progress at school was not bad. Within a short time, he could read and write in a simple way. But his aversion to arithmetic continued. On the other hand, he became more and more adroit in imitating others and showed his originality in various ways. This is his originality, imitation, mimicry. Seeing the village potters making another talent. Seeing the village potters making images of gods and goddesses, he began to visit them and learning their art, started practicing it at home. Small boy. It became one of his hobbies. Similarly, he mixed with those who painted pictures, some sculptors, potters, and painters, and himself began to do so. Whenever he was told that someone was reading and so many things are being told, habits of the small boy. Whenever he was told that someone was reading and expounding the Puranas in the village, or that a religious drama was being enacted, he would go there and thus come to know the stories from the scriptures. So interest spiritual everywhere. He would at the same time observe very minutely the manner of presentation that appealed most to the audience. So how they are presenting, and he could master that. His wonderful memory and keen insight were of great help in these matters. From that early age, his remarkable power of imitation and an inherent sense of fun helped the lively lad to mimic the peculiar gestures of men and women. At the same time, the daily example of his parents helped to bring out his innate guilelessness and love of God. So apparently he learned that from his parents. Children learn more from the actions of his parents than the sermons which they give them. When he grew up, he remembered this and all his life acknowledged with a grateful heart his debt to his parents. So that is another quality, gratefulness. The reader will be able to judge for himself when he reads the following words which he afterwards said to us at Dakshineshwar. My mother was the very embodiment of simplicity. That is the spiritual merit. She did not understand anything of worldly matters and could not count money. Not realizing the danger of saying all the things to all the persons, she would give out whatever came in her mind to anybody and everybody. So guilelessness. For these people called her silly. She also liked to feed one and all. So he is remembering that in old age also. All the spiritual merits. My father never accepted a gift from a Shudra. He spent the greater part of the day in worship, japa and meditation. When at the time of his daily prayer, he would recite the invocation to Gayatri, O Shining One, O Giver of Boons, come, etc. His chest would expand, become flushed, and he bathed in tears. So everything was by feeling or experience. When not engaged in worship or other religious practices, he spent his time making flower garlands with the help of thread and needle to adorn Raghuveer. Fear of his father's thing is telling Gadadhar. So he remembered the spiritual qualities of the man. Fear of giving false evidence made him give up his parental homestead. The villagers paid him the respect and reverence due to a sage, the boy's courage. So that is over on the topic, the boy's courage. As days went by, the boy's remarkable courage also began to show itself in various ways. Fear is not there at all. Without the least fear, he went to places where even elderly persons dare not go for fear of ghosts, ghouls, and the like. His father's sister Ramshila would sometimes be possessed by the spirit of the goddess Shitala. She then became as it were a different person. Once about this time, when she was staying with her brother at Kamarpukur, that change came over her and everyone in the house regarded her with awe and devotion. But Gadadhar watched his aunt in that state, no doubt with reverence, but without the slightest fear. He stayed near and observed very minutely the change that had come over her. So that is also spiritual. So he saw that. Afterwards he said, it would be splendid if the spirit who possessed aunt would possess me. So fearlessness. He would have liked to be possessed by the demigod, higher beings. The boy's aptitude for making friends. Remember, all these are spiritual merits. The reader is already acquainted with Manik Raja, the landlord of the village of Bursubo, who was known for his charity and devotion. Attracted by Kshudiram's pious nature, he became his intimate friend. One day Gadadhar, then a boy of 6, was taken by his father to Manik Raja's house. He behaved towards everybody in that house as if they were his old friends, and was so natural and sweet that he became dear to them all from that very day. Manik Raja's brother Ramjay was so charmed that he said to Kshudiram, "Friend, this son of yours is not an ordinary child. It seems to me that he possesses godly qualities in a marked degree." So that is the impression created. Whenever you come this way, please bring him along. I feel so happy to see him. For various reasons, Gadadhar could not go again to Manik Raja's place for some time. So Manik Raja sent one of the women of his family to find out the reason and to bring Gadadhar on a short visit to Bursubo if it were possible. When his father asked whether he would like to go, the boy was happy and went with the woman. He returned to Kamarpukur before dusk with presents of various kinds of sweets and ornaments. Gadadhar became such a pet of that Brahmin family that they used to send for him whenever Khudiram could not go to Bursubo for some days. So, charm spreading outside his family. The remarkable development of Gadadhar's power of imagination. Imagination is a great power, and if used spiritually or rightly, it is great help in spiritual life. Gradually, a year went by, and Gadadhar was now 7. As the child's sweet nature developed, everybody loved him more and more. Whenever the women of the village prepared any delicacies in their house, their first thought was how to get the boy eat some of them, like we offer the first thing to God. His playmates never felt happy till they had shared their food with him. Okay. He had such charming ways and spoke and sang so sweetly that the neighbors cheerfully put up with his childish pranks. About this time, an incident occurred would make Gadadhar's parents and friends very anxious about the boy. By the grace of God, Gadadhar was born with a strong and robust constitution. And until now, he had not suffered from any disease. We remember that he was born without crying. As a result, he was wonderfully buoyant and cheerful like a free bird. Well-known physicians say, important definition, well-known physicians say that it is the absence of body consciousness that is the sign of health. What is the sign of health? What is the sign of disease? I feel I have a nose. I feel I have a mouth. If there is some defect in them. So if I have no defect, I do not feel at all that I have the body. So that is the best sign. That is what doctors are telling. Well-known physicians say that it is this absence of body consciousness that is the sign of health. It was this kind of health that the boy enjoyed from his birth. This kind of health, when he is not conscious of the body at all. Whenever his mind, which was naturally one-pointed, became absorbed in a particular object, his body consciousness almost vanished and became completely identified with the idea on which he set his mind. So, transcending the body consciousness. The enchanting view of the vast green fields fanned by the gentle breeze, the incessant flow of the river, the melodious songs of the birds, and above all, the magic of ever-changing clouds in the deep blue sky would at times unfold their mystery and glory to the boy's inner vision and hold him spellbound. He would then lose himself completely and enter the unknown, distant, and solitary domain of the spirit. The experience we now relate also had its origin in the boy's tendency towards the spiritual contemplation of beauty. Spiritual contemplation of beauty, not that enjoyment sense in the beauty. Sublime sense. One day while roaming carefree in the fields, Gadadhar looked up at the sky and saw a newly formed dark cloud, and against it the rhythmic movement of a flock of cranes in full flight. With their snow-white wings outspread, the boy became so completely absorbed in the beauty of it all that that awareness of his own body and of all other earthly things vanished altogether and he fell down unconscious, outside unconscious. So much absorption. And we have had the description of this in Master's own words in the Sadat Bhav chapter 2. His friends, finding him in that condition, were alarmed and distressed. They sent word to his parents and the boy was carried home from the field. As soon as he regained consciousness, he was his old self again. So no epileptic fit. Naturally, the incident caused a lot of worry to Kshudrama and Chandra Devi, and they thought of various means to prevent its happening again. In fact, they thought it to be the beginning of a fainting fit. Outside ghost will not overpower him, but his health. to prevent its happening again. In fact, they thought it to be the beginning of fainting fits and considered what remedy should be applied and whether propitiatory rites should be performed. But Gadadhar told them again and again that what had happened to him was really due to his being merged in a feeling he had never experienced before, transcendental feeling. And that although he was found outwardly unconscious, he was conscious inwardly and had experienced a unique bliss. However, as it did not recur and as nothing was wrong with the boy's health, Shudiram thought that it was due to a fit. But Chandra felt convinced that the boy had come under the evil eye. Anyhow, they kept him away from school for some time, free to go whenever he liked, whenever he chose in the village. The boy gave himself to play and fun even more than before. So not going to school, then be in fun. The autumn festival in connection with the worship of Durga at Ramchandra's house. So we move to the second topic in this chapter called his death of his father. And the occasion is this Durga Puja in Ramchand's house where he had gone. Gadadhar was about 7 years and a half at the time of the great autumn festival of Bengal in 1843. Saradiya Durga Puja. Durga Puja during autumn. So it is called the autumn festival. The reader already knows Ramchandra's Bandopadhyay, Khudiram's prosperous nephew. He used to spend most of his time in Medinipur as he made his living there. His paternal home was in the village of Selampur, where his family lived. There every year, Ramchandra celebrated the great autumn festival at a great expense. We have heard from Hriday that for 8 days at the time of worship, the Selampur ring with music and sound. The family experienced a continuous flow of joy in feeding Brahmins, offering parting gifts to Pandits, feeding the poor, and giving them clothes. So that is the Durga Puja. On those occasions, Ramachandra would bring his revered uncle to his house and spend some happy days with him. That year also, Ramchandra and his family were cordially invited. Khudiram and his family were cordially invited when the time came, Durga Puja time. Khudiram and Ramkumar go to Ramchandra's house. Khudiram had almost completed his 68th year and had now lost his former vigor on account of dyspepsia and dysentery, from which he had suffered often in the previous few years. So in spite of his desire to go, he hesitated to accept his dear nephew's loving invitation. He began to feel an unaccountable but strong desire, disinclination to leave his humble cottage, his family, and especially Gadadhar, even for a few days. Then he thought, if I do not go this year, Who knows whether with my increasing weakness, I shall be able to go there again. He at first intended to take Gadadhar with him, but then he remembered that this would make Chandra very anxious. So unselfishness is in them, all of them. As he could not take Gadadhar, he finally decided to go with his eldest son Ramkumar. Somebody must take because he has become too old. Spend the few days of worship with Ramchandra and then return. He paid homage to Raghuveer, bade goodbye to all, kissed Gadadhar and started for Selampur a few days before the commencement of the festival. Ramchandra was very happy at the arrival of his revered uncle and his cousin Ramkumar. Khudiram's illness and death. So he was not keeping well for some days. Khudiram had a relapse of his old complaint dysentery. That was the most troublesome complaint in those days in Bengal. Immediately after reaching Selampur and was placed under treatment, but that did not interfere with the happy mood in which the 6th, 7th and 8th days of the bright fortnight were spent. That is the puja days. On the 9th day, however, Khudiram's illness suddenly took a serious turn and caused great anxiety in that mart of joy. Ramchandra called an efficient doctors and started nursing his uncle with the help of his sister, Hemangini, and cousin Ramkumar, who had gone with him. But Khudiram's condition did not improve. The 9th day passed somehow, and now came the 10th day, Vijaya, especially sacred for the Hindus as the time of reunion. That is, especially in Bengal. They salute each other and embrace each other, elders, smallers, all. So that is the speciality of Vijayadashmi in Bengal, reunion. That day, Khudiram became so weak that it was difficult for him to speak at all. As soon as the immersion ceremony of the image of Durga was over in the afternoon, Ramchandra hastened back to his uncle at bedside. He found that the last moment was drawing near. On inquiry, he learned that Khudiram had been lying silent in the same condition for a long time. Then Ramchandra in tears said to him, Uncle, you always take the name of Raghuveer. Why don't you do so now? The sound of that name at once roused Khudiram. And in a trembling, halting voice, he said, Is that you, Ramchandra? Have you come after immersing the image? Then make me sit up. When Ramchandra, Hemangini and Ramkumar had helped him with great care to sit up on the bed, Khudiram in a solemn tone uttered the name of Raghuveer thrice and left his body. The drop of water mingled with the ocean. Lord Raghuveer merged this breath of life of the devotee in his infinite life, and thus blessed his devotee with immortality and peace everlasting without the body. And he uttered only the name thrice, and that is the sure sign that he merged in Ramchandra. At dead of night, the village rang with the loud singing of the praises of the divine God. Shudiram's body was then brought to the river bank and after consecration by fire was cremated. The news reached Kamarpukur the next day and filled Shudiram's happy abode with sorrow. When the period of mourning was over, Ramkumar performed the Shraddha ceremony as prescribed the scripture and fed many Brahmins, thus completing his father's last rites. It is said that Ramkumar gave a large sum toward the expenses of the ceremony performed in honor of the departed spirit of the uncle. So, the important point here is that Shudiram, necessary for the birth of Gadadhar, Shudiram, necessary for the initial training of that boy, and now Shudiram's work in this drama was over, and now the boy has to grow without his father, with the help of his elder brother and mother. Om Sarvadharma Sthapakasvam Sarvadharma Swarupakah Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.